I'm still getting the hang of remembering to update the name of the game on Twitch whenever I stream. It's just one more thing to remember. My long COVID brain fog. I forget stuff a lot. But welcome, my viewers on Twitch, my viewers on YouTube, to another episode of my Cell to Singularity Let's Play. I hope you're doing well, taking care of each other, and being kind to yourselves. For those new to my channel, you should know you can find all my series organized in playlists on my YouTube channel, from oldest to newest, so chronological order. Do check it out. Anyways, and of course, I appreciate those of you who are coming back to my channel yet again. So Northstar, I am, as I said, disabled with long COVID. I am desperately trying to get my YouTube and Twitch to where I can earn money, hopefully eventually survive. I'm applying to SSI, and the Social Security Administration is, of course, messing with me. I got cheated out of SSDI, but work credit rules didn't give me credit for working multiple jobs at once. Didn't give me credit for working for university while I was in graduate school there, doing jobs that would have earned work credits if I wasn't a student. And in fact, there was one semester I took leave of absence and I was earning work credits for work that, was no more or less important than the stuff I was doing when I was a student and getting the SSDI work credits because those jobs were exempt from payroll tax, a rule added by Newt Gingrich in the 90s specifically to screw young people get disabled. Because, yeah, sometimes even when you can't see how it benefits the rich or the powerful, the cruelty is just the point with the right wingers. Although this does benefit the rich and powerful by saving the Social Security Administration money on SSI, so there's less pressure to increase payroll taxes and other taxes to keep the system from running out, and to make it even harder to get disability, to create an ever more desperate population, even if those who are disabled can't work, because of course, many of us can't, like myself, by certain amount of disability. They hope maybe their family loved ones work harder to try and support them, so that they don't die homeless. If they're people who care enough. In my case, family members I have aren't, mostly, except for a single grandparent who's been of help, likely to do any of that, and that's a wealthy grandparent. I should briefly mention, I guess, I'm from a weird mixed class background. Wealthy family, upper class family members, but grew up dirt poor myself. Um, huh. That gave chips, probably because that's the first time I ever did Uranaberg. I can't imagine that's lasting. That unlocks the pendulum clock? No, that's this new thing that's available anyways. Interesting. It's probably past time to upgrade, reset. Um, but yeah, my parents got divorced. My mother has mental health issues, and father badmouthed her constantly, so that kind of destroyed her earnings capabilities. Um, which means that sorry, I'm just scrubbing some upgrades here. Idea time chambers, conceptual converter, uh, idea time chamber, futuristic fusion, ancestral ascension. Right. Futuristic fusion. Sounds like I got the knowledge points for it. Let's see if I can't. Nope, can't quite finish up the idea booster. So my parents didn't have a lot of money, which is why I grew up poor. But grandparents' generation, a lot of wealth. Uh, on one side of the family, old money, on the other side, new money. But it creates the weird kind of awkward position that actually historically many revolutionaries have occupied. I was looking up the life histories of people like Lenin and Marx, and they usually come from wealthier families, though they themselves often weren't wealthy, um, which gave them access to education and at least a childhood that was not so stressed that they could, get a good foundation for future learning, early childhood education stuff, while their families have been providing their scions good early childhood educations long before this became something that was ever, championed of trying to provide it to the rest of society. Uh, so whether it's Lenin or Marx or actually Friedrich Engels too, if I remember correctly, although he might have been new money himself, self-made man with a factory ownership. I forget. Um, Often the people who help crush the power of the elites, and yeah, of course, this is nonsense that Trump falsely claims to be, which is a class trader, the good kind, the kind where rich people help ordinary people, as opposed to the bad kind, where ordinary people turn on their own, like say J.D. Vance's. Kim's from a poor background, but has of course turned around and screwed poor people as much as possible, and are often rewarded for this betrayal of people from similar backgrounds by, well, the very powerful and rich. I don't know. I was watching this guy who mostly does finance videos, and I did not subscribe to him because a lot of it's this right wing nonsense. But he was talking about class traders, and it was surprising left wing stuff from a YouTuber who was mostly. So it got me thinking about that. I just came across it when I was trying to see. I was thinking about putting out a video talking about this, about class traders and how they actually were critical to whether it's FDR or Lenin actually changing societies for the better. Uh, and yes, Lenin did change the society for the better. Tsarist Russia was brutal. That's not to say that Soviet was any means perfect, but what predated it was absolutely horrible. Something that you get these historical revisionists who like to pretend that the Tsarist Russia was somehow good just so they can hate the Soviets. History is sometimes incremental steps towards a better future. Soviet Union had major problems in many ways. There were things that the West had advantages over in it, though it was actually developing much faster in capitalist countries, similar economic social development levels. Say Brazil is a country with a similar economic and social development level, but when you look at things like the rights of the disabled, the rights of women, the rights of minorities in Brazil and the Soviet Union, both in the mid 70s, even though in the early 20s, when both nations formed, they started off in a similar place. You find Soviets had climbed miles further than the Brazilians had. Brazilians were capitalist, Soviets were socialist. So even though they were nowhere on the level of, say, the US and many things, although in women's education and rights, they were actually ahead of the West for a very long time. They had women getting PhDs in enormous numbers in the Soviet Union. In a time period, there was an overlap where women weren't allowed to own bank accounts without their husband's approval in the United States. This was before the sexual revolution and women's rights. So this would be like the late 50s, early 60s. There is that overlap. You have segregation in the US, women not allowed to have independent bank accounts. In the Soviet Union, they were reviving dead languages, like basically the equivalent of Native American languages, but for the Soviet Union, and giving women PhDs. So they were ahead of the US in that. They were behind in many other ways, but in that, they were ahead. They were also, of course, the first nation to space. Which goes into what I've said many times. You have to view nations in context. You can't say, well, they're worse than this other nation. You have to say, how do they compare to other nations that started in a similar place? How have they progressed their society? What have they done to advance humanity? And the Soviets did far more to advance humanity than similarly developed capitalist countries like Brazil. Initially similarly developed, but the Soviets, of course, pulled way ahead of them. They should never have been compared to the United States, though. The U.S. started an order of magnitude more developed than the Soviets. When the Russian Empire fell, it had less than a tenth of the GDP per capita of the United States by the time the Russian Civil War was over, which slowed economic growth enormously. In fact, actually led to shrinkage of the GDP per capita. By the time the Russian Civil War was over, they had 1/13 the GDP per capita of the U.S. 1/13. That's an enormously less developed country. And of course, they were war torn. It'd be like the U.S. after its Civil War, but without the advantages of a vast undeveloped land that was being stolen from the Americans at the point of guns, but was hugely important to the U.S. In its economic development. An inexcusable crime. What was done to Native Americans was genocide that did enable the U.S. to become the superpower it was, and people say as if it's to the credit of the U.S. No. If a serial killer killed a bunch of people and stole their wealth, we wouldn't say that they had become wealthy through their own merits, that they were a good person. Why do we say the U.S. is good for stealing all this land from the Americans and becoming very, very wealthy and important because of it? It's the elephant in the room that's never talked about. The subtext to all this, oh, U.S. is the greatest nation on earth nonsense. Anyways, I don't know. I'm a Christian, and I do believe the charge of Christians, and indeed, actually, many Jewish people will tell you that essentially the same charge lies on them, is to fight injustice wherever you see it. I mean, that goes back to the shared Old Testament prophetic tradition of calling out and opposing injustice. So it predates the formation of Christianity, which is why both Judaism and Christianity share this as what should be the obligations, even if people turn their backs on it, of people. And I mention this because long COVID and how it's being treated is a great example of people falling short of that. This disease sucks, and what sucks more is how people react to it. Give you an example of a social interaction to highlight some stuff. When I go in dating apps, because I was single before this, and obviously being disabled makes it very, very hard to not be single, because people don't want to date someone who's disabled. But I often get the question, "Oh, what church do you go to?" Well, here's the thing: go to any church. Well, there's some who do this faith healing nonsense, but of course it doesn't actually heal long COVID. But most other churches that are more don't do that. They too often embrace something that's almost along the lines of people get what they deserve and God is favoring is chosen kind of crap. It's crap. It's gospel of wealth that's useful because it makes rich members of the congregation happy and likely to donate because they feel praised and accepted, and they're the ones who have a lot of money, so it's done out of greed. But if I ever went to one of those, churches and in a casual conversation mentioned, okay, this is something that I've constantly prayed about, it's not getting better. So clearly, if you, aren't going to try the God does horrible things for mysterious purposes sort of nonsense, this is something that Christians are called on to stand in solidarity. So are you going to write a letter to your congressperson? Are you going to speak out? Will you help me form organizations or join existing organizations about long COVID justice? Because there's the Long COVID Justice Foundation, for instance. What kind of responses am I get? No. This is political, as if political stuff, as if Christianity had always been deeply political. I mean, for gosh sakes, Jesus stood against the Roman Empire and its cruelty and oppression. Just because it's not that political stuff has no role in Christianity, it's that they don't want they want to put these things off limits so that they can't be criticized for not doing what's right. What's right is to stand for those people who are suffering, who are oppressed, who have a disease that the government has cut funding into research to cure under Trump, and that is still not does not have a what's known as a blue book entry. So Social Security Administration makes it very hard to get uh, SSI or SSDI for long COVID because they haven't created an official recognition of it as a disease that's a disabling disease in their internal bureaucratic system. Um, Standing against that and helping people like me to survive by standing against that so I don't end up dead and homeless because I'm unable to work with this disease. And the government's trying to prevent me from getting Social Security. The ridiculous claim, oh, based on your age and education, you could adjust out of work. Having a graduate degree doesn't help me when I have brain fog and I can't do high level cognitive tasks. Being young doesn't help me when I'm so fatigued all the time due to long COVID that I can maybe stream or work on anything for an hour and they have to lay down for an hour and I can only do this back and forth for between 2 and 4 hours of total work in a day. It's nonsense. The government is just hoping I'll end up homeless and dead. And the only reason I'm not already is because of some of the branches of family that are wealthier and putting aside money, life savings, because I was trying to become a physician before long COVID. And I was originally saving up for MCAT prep courses. Then when I got into a special master's, I was doing extraordinarily well. And on retaking the MCAT while I was in that program, did very, very well in the MCAT, even better than the first time, which is actually a very high score too. Knew I was going to end up getting to med school, so it was actually being saved to cushion my time at med school, make it a little easier so I wouldn't have to worry about money and could focus on my studies. So my life savings was supposed to be for that. It helps me now to pay rent. I was staying with family for a while, but it was an abusive situation. I had to get out of that. And different family member, the one who's then the grandfather's helped me, not that person. But anyways, where was I? Losing my train of thought. Huh. No dropped frames so far. That's good. Trying to get these upgrades, but they're just not yet. Probably have to come back to this or something. It's only going to get them. So this tab. Let's go see if there's any Mesozoic Valley little thing with the, I don't know, it's the yellow thing. This one of those they can click without having to spend Darwinium. Yep, there was. Right to then burrowing. Ichusor is not worth. All right, well, quick look at beyond. Sometimes you get cold and asteroids are poking around here. But you have to zoom in on the solar system. Yeah, I mean, the government would rather that I die, especially like under Trump fascist crap, because they would rather I was dead than consuming resources, not being able to do much to enrich the billionaires, who, of course, the Republican Party is owned by, but so are the Democrats. They are feckless, and they're just controlled opposition. And I'm so sick of people saying, oh, we'll vote Putin no matter who. It's ridiculous. People get all angry about right now the horrible things the Trump administration is doing, but then you have people doing nothing to prepare for the 2028 elections, where the Democrats have just put up some terrible centrists who will solve none of the problems that led to too many people voting for Trump in the first place, the economic problems of rising inequality and billionaire control of elections, because let's be clear, a lot of the reason Trump won is because of massive, massive billionaire funding and alliances with like didn't even always have to be funding, just the billionaires who already have their far right and right wing, not always far right, but center right, far right wing think tanks, and just sicking the think tanks and newspapers they already own on supporting him helped him rise to power. It's not just campaign donations. People get hyperfixated in that and ignore all the other ways that the rich control politics in this country. And yes, the opinions of think tanks do matter because it affects media coverage. And then, of course, ownership of the media matters. And these both, of course, matter. So there are a lot of think tanks going around spewing pro GOP, or at least less weakly supportive of left wing policies than they should be if you look at the facts. Propaganda. It makes it easy uh, for the media to justify. Oop, accidentally sped this up somehow. Uh, oh, I turned it to reverse to where the planets were orbiting reverse, I think. Because, yeah, let's see. Yeah, they were orbiting reverse. Because then, media articles will quote these right wing think tanks or billionaire owned think tanks that are supporting the right and just pretend that it's unbiased coverage and they're giving both sides of the story. And the more voices these think tanks put out, the more they can claim that most of the voices align this way. So this is used to either crush real left wing movements within the Democrats, such as Sanders, or to support far right politics like Trump's. Billionaires basically own U.S. politics. It's what Lenin talked about. I am not a Marxist Leninist, but Lenin still had valid critiques that should be heeded about so-called bourgeois democracy. That is, the countries that the U.S. are not really democracies; they're billionaire controlled. The bourgeois can be translated better as billionaires and 100 millionaires, 0.1%. So, put it in language that isn't just specific terminology for that's wrapped up with an ideology. You could basically say he was calling countries like the U.S. 0.1% democracies, which most people will admit if you remove the politically loaded term, these are systems that are controlled only by the very wealthy and don't care what ordinary people think. Um, but anyways, it's, as I said, it's made worse by things like churches not wanting to challenge narratives about diseases like long COVID, not wanting to stand even with congregation members who are sick with it. Of course, I don't say this on a ton of personal experience, mind, but more the interactions I've had with many so-called Christians developing long COVID. Because the disease leaves me tired and stuff, it's hard to get to church environments. I've been once or twice. When I did, there was this sense that I couldn't talk about this disease, that, oh, it's too political. Can't say I actually tried to push those limits. More sense they were there and knew better and to try. Maybe I would have been pleasantly surprised if I tried to really push people's preconceived notions that they were more open than I thought. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt.